Hello and welcome to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. My name is Natalie Himmelrich. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is completely self-funded, produced and edited by me, Natalie Himmelrich. Consider making a small donation to support the podcast. Go to bit.ly/support, capital G, capital T, and podcast. I repeat, bit.ly/supportgt podcast. Thank you so much. And for more information, please visit Natalie's website, join the podcast Instagram page, and subscribe to the newsletter to receive updates on future episodes. Welcome to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. I'm your host, Natalie Himmelrich. Today marks the start of a very special mini-series. One that is close to my heart and the hearts of so many parents around the world. October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, a month dedicated to honoring babies who are no longer with us and holding space for families who carry their memory every single day. Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness is short PAIL. So this PAIL Mini Series is created with two intentions: to support those who are grieving after pregnancy and infant loss, and to educate and empower those who want to support them, like family, friends, and professionals alike. If you haven't yet listened to episode 142, titled Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness, I encourage you to go back and start there. It sets the tone for this month's conversation and provides context for what we'll explore together. It gives a little bit of the background of how pregnancy and infant loss awareness came into life. The first time I heard about it, or I became aware of it, was after my infant loss. So pregnancy and infant loss holds space for all the babies who died during pregnancy, in stillbirth, or up to about 28 days after their birth, which is considered infant loss or neonatal loss in specific. So here's how this series will unfold. Throughout October, you'll hear a mix of solo episodes like today's and replays of some of the most powerful conversations I've had over the past 3 years on this topic. The series started already with episode 144, which was a replay of the very first How to Deal with Grief and Trauma episode ever, with my guest Rachel Tenpenny McGonigal now, which is still one of the most loved and listened to conversations. I personally love speaking with Rachel, and she has been a guest on the podcast multiple times, so go and check out her episodes, which you can find on the episode overview on my website. Then, as I mentioned, 142, which was an overview over pregnancy and infant loss awareness, is also part of this series. The replays, they will continue on the 8th, the 12th, the 16th, the 20th, 24th, and 28th, each marked with replay in the title, showcasing, as I said, the most impactful discussions about pregnancy and infant loss based on the numbers of downloads they had. Between these, I'll be releasing solo reflections like today, and on the 10th, 14th, 18th, 22nd, 26th, and 30th, each one touching on a different aspect of pregnancy and infant loss. For example, how we grieve, how we heal, and how we can support each other through it. You can find all the episodes that are on the topic of pregnancy and infant loss as part of the episode overview on my website. I will link the page in the show notes. So let's begin today's episode with the first and perhaps the most important truth. Your grief is real and valid. It doesn't matter if your loss happened at 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 20 weeks, 35 weeks pregnancy, at birth, or shortly after. It doesn't matter if you had named your baby or hadn't yet chosen one. It also doesn't matter if the world recognized your baby as real. You did. And that's what matters. So many parents I work with share that their grief feels invisible because they didn't have time to make memories, take photos, or some didn't, or introduce their child to the world. Their loss often goes unacknowledged. My daughter, my younger twin daughter, she lived for 3 days, and only very few people met her. So her name is almost never spoken. But grief is not measured by the visibility, or by the number of days your baby lived, or the number of weeks you were pregnant with your baby. Grief is measured by love, by your love, and by the depth of the bond that you formed, often long before birth. So let's pause for a moment. If you're listening and you experience this kind of loss, take a slow breath. Feel your body. Notice your heart. You are allowed to grieve. You're allowed to grieve in your own way. You are allowed to feel broken. And you are allowed to love your baby openly in the way that you choose. You don't need to justify your sadness to anyone. You don't have to compare your loss to someone else's. And you don't have to move on. In my many years of working with bereaved parents, I've heard the same ache expressed in different words. Such as, people told me it wasn't really a baby yet, if they lost it through miscarriage. Or many people hear the sentence, you can try again. Or many have shared with me that people surrounding them have avoided them or avoided their eyes. These words and actions or inactions, they hurt. Because they deny the reality of what was lost. It's not just a baby. It's the hopes and the plans and imagined future. So if you are listening and supporting someone who's grieving, please know the most healing words you can say are often the simplest. Such as, I am so sorry. Or I wish this weren't your reality. I'm here for you. You don't have to say more than that. And you don't have to fix it. It cannot be fixed. You just have to acknowledge it. Grief needs to be witnessed, and by your acknowledgement, you make it real and that it matters. Pregnancy and infant loss touches so many aspects of our being: body, mind, spirit, and identity. It can shake our sense of safety in the world, our faith, and even our relationships. And it can leave us feeling like no one truly understands. So this doesn't just apply to pregnancy and infant loss. It also applies to other losses. So I want to say this clearly. You are not alone in this. You are not alone. There's a community of parents, professionals, and compassionate hearts who get it. And you deserve to have your grief witnessed without judgment, without minimization, and without comparison. Now let's talk about the second half of today's topic. How to show up for someone who is grieving without trying to fix their pain. That's really important. Notice if you're supporting someone, how much of you want to make them feel better or relieve their pain. It's human nature to want to do something to comfort or find solution to make it better. But if you've ever felt helpless in the face of someone else's loss, you are not alone. Even I, who have been working with clients for many, many years and have myself been in the space where I lost an infant, where I experienced this infant loss, me too, I felt lost for words. This is normal. When it comes to grief, there isn't a fix. But what counts is presence. So let's have a look how presence can show up, or how can it look like practically. So showing up even if you don't know what to say. Sitting in silence, allowing tears, letting them talk or not talk, depending on what they need that day. I remember the very few first days after my daughters were born, friends came to visit us at the hospital, and there was not much to say, and I for sure didn't have many words. But they were just there, present, sitting with me, holding me. Sometimes the most healing thing you can offer is your steady presence. So not just in the first few days, weeks, months, but also in a longer way. So here's what showing up without fixing might look like. Bringing food, but not expecting conversation. So we had friends organizing a food train, which organized different people to bring something at different times. They asked us what we liked or didn't like, and I had a gluten intolerance. And they made food, and sometimes they brought it and just put it in the letterbox. Sometimes they brought it to our door or left it in front of the door if we weren't home. Another way is sending a simple message. Write an SMS or a WhatsApp message. Just simply say, I'm thinking of you today. Vary this in different ways, but let them know you are here and you're still here, even if they don't answer. With pregnancy and infant loss, it is so beautiful if you remember their baby's name and use it. You can imagine that this name that the parents have chosen is rarely being used. So for them to hear you say the baby's name is so special. Even for me, 14 years later, if I hear Amaya's name, or if I see it written in a comment on Instagram, for example, or in an email or in a card, it makes me smile because she's not forgotten. And so in the long run, that means acknowledging anniversaries and milestones. So continue writing messages. It doesn't have to be an anniversary or milestone, but specifically those. Write their baby's birthday in your calendar and mention it. And if you're lost for words, simply saying, I don't have the words or the right words right now, but I'm here, is so much more than just not showing up. And just to give you some things on the other side, but we'll cover that in a future episode, is what often hurts, even though it's well meant, are statements such as, at least you can have another baby, or everything happens for a reason, or be grateful for what you have. In my case with twins, someone said, at least you've got one and she's healthy. Now the thing with those comments is, even though they're well meant, they hurt. They are maybe Some are even cognitively true, but they are emotionally barren. Because grief doesn't need silver linings, it needs validation. You can't take away their pain, but you can hold space for it. And in that space, healing happens. For those who are grieving, it's okay to communicate what you need, provided you know what you need. But you often know what you need because you're getting something you don't need or that makes you angry or annoyed. So you might say something like, I don't need advice, I just need you to listen. Or, I'd love it if you could remember my baby's name and say it. Another one is, can you check in on me around the due date? Grief is a long road, and it takes courage for both the griever and the supporter to stay on this road together. So let's bring this to a round and integrate and reflect on what I've spoken today. I want to leave you with a few reflections. So if you're grieving, please know your grief is real. It matters and you matter. Nothing about this is your fault. Your love didn't end with your baby's life. It continues in you and through you. If you're a supporter, remember you don't need the perfect words. Just presence. Just care. And just your willingness to stay. Pregnancy and infant loss can be incredibly isolating, but it can also bring profound connection when we learn to hold space. Not fix, not rush, not silence, but witness. So this was the first solo episode in our Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month mini-series. Our next episode, the solo episode, is coming on October 10th and is titled The Loneliness of Loss and What to Say and What Not to Say, and where we'll explore the power of words and actions or silence and non-action in grief support. So if this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need it, whether they're grieving or supporting someone who is. You can also find additional resources, my book Grieving Parents Surviving Loss as a Couple, and in my courses like Healing Steps, which you'll find on my website, nataliehimmelrich.com. You can also find all the links, as I mentioned, in the show notes. And as always, thank you for being part of this community, a space where grief is spoken, understood, and honored. Take gentle care, and I'll meet you again in the next episode.
Thanks for listening to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. If you'd like to be updated on future episodes, please subscribe to my newsletter on nataliehimmelrich.com. If you need grief support, please contact me for a 30 minutes free discovery session. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is produced and edited by me, Natalie Himmelrich. To support this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. And remember to keep breathing. I promise it will get easier.